If you've ever studied a language, you've probably bumped into these labels on a textbook or maybe on a resume: A1, B2, C1. But what do they actually mean? Today, we're going to unpack the really powerful framework that gives those letters their meaning, the CEFR. So, let's say you put on your resume that you're B2 in French. It sounds pretty good, right? But what does that really tell someone? Does it mean the same thing to an employer in Paris as it does to a university in Montreal? Probably not. And that ambiguity, that's exactly the problem these labels were created to solve. Without a common standard, it's just chaos. Schools, companies, even us learners, we're all just kind of guessing. How can you possibly compare a language certificate from Spain with one from Germany? We desperately need a shared vocabulary, a common reference point, so we can all talk about language skills and actually understand each other. Well, thankfully, there is a solution to all this confusion. So let's dive into the framework that was built from the ground up to create that common language for all of us. So, what exactly is the CEFR? Well, it stands for the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. Yeah, it's a mouthful. And it was developed by the Council of Europe. But the really key phrase to focus on here is comprehensive descriptive scheme. That's just a fancy way of saying it's not a test. It's a whole detailed system for describing what language learners can do at every stage of their journey. And its mission is so much bigger than just labeling how good you are at a language. I mean, the whole framework was created to improve language education across the board, to help build bridges between cultures, and even to protect Europe's incredible linguistic diversity. It's really an educational tool with this deep humanistic vision behind it. Okay, let's get into the part of the CEFR that most people recognize, those 6 levels. But the framework sees these levels as way more than just a simple ladder you have to climb. I absolutely love the analogy on this slide, which comes right from the source material. It says that language ability isn't a series of separate boxes you just check off. Instead, it's a continuum, like the colors of a rainbow. The edges are fuzzy, they bleed into each other, and your progress is fluid. The levels are just agreed upon points along that spectrum to help us find our way. And this is how that whole spectrum is organized, so we can actually use it. The 6 levels are broken down into 3 main groups. You've got the basic user at A1 and A2, the independent user at B1 and B2, and finally, the proficient user at C1 and C2. This gives us a really clear roadmap from those very first breakthrough moments all the way up to mastery. But here's the thing, just defining the levels was only half the battle. One of the CEFR's biggest, most revolutionary ideas was completely rethinking what we even mean when we say language skills. So the framework pushes us past the classic 4 skills we all learned in school. Reception kind of replaces passive listening and reading. Production covers both speaking and writing. But the real game changers here are interaction, which captures the real two-way street of a conversation, and this absolutely fascinating concept called mediation. And this just shows why that change matters so much. Real-life communication isn't neatly segmented. You don't just listen for a while and then, okay, stop, now you speak. No, you interact. You explain things, you summarize, you help other people understand. This model is built from the ground up to describe language as we actually use it. And this brings up a really key point. The CEFR isn't some ancient document set in stone. It's a living, breathing thing designed to adapt as our world and, the way we talk to each other changes. The 2020 update is the perfect example. It added a pre-A1 level for absolute beginners, which is great, but crucially, it also brought in descriptors for online interaction. Finally acknowledging our digital lives, right? It also expanded on plurilingualism and even added scales for sign language, making the whole framework more inclusive and more relevant than ever before. So let's just zoom in on that idea of mediation for a second, because it's so important in the new framework. This isn't just about formal word-for-word translation. It's the social skill of being a bridge between people. It's summarizing a complex report for your team, explaining a cultural nuance to a visitor, or even just paraphrasing what someone said to help everyone find common ground. And this focus on active social language use, it isn't just a small detail. It is the core philosophy that drives the entire framework. This quote from the source document, this is the key to everything. The CEFR completely reframes the learner. You're not just a student in a classroom anymore, you're a social agent who is using language to accomplish things, to interact, to act in the world. It's such a profound shift in how we think about learning. What this really means is that the framework fundamentally shifts our focus. It moves us away from a deficiency model, where we're obsessed with all the grammar you haven't mastered yet, to a positive proficiency model. The question is always, what cool things can you do with the language you have right now? And this whole action-oriented approach has a really practical impact on teaching and learning. It means you start with real-world needs, you create clear can-do goals from those needs, and then you design tasks that let learners actually practice and achieve them. It makes learning feel so much more purposeful. So, where does all this leave us? Is the CEFR some kind of perfect, future-proof system? Well, the creators themselves would say no, and honestly, that's its greatest strength. The creators are really clear that the CEFR should never be treated like a set of rigid mandatory rules. It's a reference tool. It's there for reflection and planning. It's meant to be adapted and customized by educators to fit the real needs of their learners and to evolve as our understanding of communication itself evolves. And that brings us to a final, really thought-provoking question. The framework is already adapted to include things like online interaction and mediation. So as our world continues to change, in this age of instant translation, AI, and global digital communities, how will our very definition of what it means to be fluent change right along with it?